Greetings, Guardians. I am Sapphire Tempest, the self-proclaimed candle of stories, returning once more with another fascinating tale to tell. I know I declared it true in the title, but I did not mean to intone an overall truth, rather a truth by the nature of perspective. My perspective. For this is my theory, which I hold as the undisputed truth to Nezarec's true story. Like my graphic novel script, I have written and rewritten this video script about 5 different times, and then got into a conversation on Vinextron's Discord that changed my entire perspective on the character. Said change nearly caused me to lose hope in this belief altogether. Until I realized my new perspective didn't cancel out anything I've said, but rather helped me to understand one of the most crucial elements of Nezarec's existence I didn't have much of an understanding of prior. Now I believe this theory is cold stone solid. Now, I know you may be skeptical. You may even disagree entirely. That is fine. But you'll have to prove me wrong if you want me to double down. And even then, there is no force on this world that can stop me from finding a counter-argument. With that said, let me clarify one more thing. This video is one of 3 parts in a theory trilogy. I split it up because the script got way too large for me to comfortably think about in the editing software. 3 separate videos are much easier for me to handle. Chapter 1. This video will go over Nezarec's origins, from creation to God. Chapter 2 will go over the rest of Nezarec's story, and my debunking of what I believe are the greatest misconceptions of Nezarec's story. And Chapter 3 will go over what I believe Nezarec is doing as of right now, and why I believe he will be the best villain we'll see in Destiny's future before the Winnower. With that laid out, let us begin, shall we? Let us dive straight down the thorny rabbit hole and straight into the belly of the beast that is Chapter 1. Before we actually get started, let me clear up a quick misconception. Nezarec did not look like this in his early life. This form is the light's alteration to his original form. In the lore Lightfall gave to us, we were told that Nezarec had a giant cape and distinctly wore a helmet. No, Nezarec did not originally have horns attached to his body. The bone horns in Lightfall's Nezarec are a light alteration made to his body during the resurrection. I know this due to the description in the lore being that of a horned headpiece. This implies that the horns are actually a part of his helmet rather than a part of his skull. And I know his entire form was reshaped by the light, due to the fact that the light does this when it feels the need to, as it did with the Lucent Hive. You can even see that very transformation taking place in the Witch Queen cinematic trailer. With that said, I will close this small statement by saying Nezarec didn't begin looking like his Lightfall rendition, but rather like this rendition I made during the process of editing this video. Keep this image in mind going forward, for that is what Nezarec actually looked like during this time. And funny enough, this is what he will look like when he returns in the future. I will provide the reason later. Now for my take on his actual origins. This area of Nezarec's story is quite a mystery, even to this day. The answer to Nezarec's origins has eluded most. Questions such as, where did he come from? How did he come to transcend reality? And where did he come to know the void? Are all mysteries none have really had an answer to. Allow me to change that. Let's start at the beginning. Where did Nezarec come from? I believe Nezarec was created by the Witness. My main reason stems from the Pantheon Twab lore. Created from Rulk's blueprint, Nezarec was the first tormentor from which all others owe their lineage. Nezarec relishes in sowing fear and pain, feeding off the terror of sentient beings. He can induce nightmares across entire worlds. Now I know this sounds like a simple and boring idea, and many would rather believe it wasn't the case, but stay with me. Over the course of this little trilogy, you will come to understand that this fact only makes Nezarec's story much more intriguing. Moving forward now, I believe that is how it started. Nezarec was created by the Witness for a specific purpose, born to be the greatest weapon the Witness ever held in its disciples, and to star in a far more important role that I will describe through detail later in time. When Nezarec was born, he was taught in the Witness's ways of discipline by Rulk, the first disciple, and raised in power to eventually rise to that rank himself. It is there that he was given his glaive, which would eventually become known as Nezarec's Whisper. In time, Nezarec would prove himself a fairly loyal disciple, trying to find his place in the universe like all the others. His sadistic habits fell into place, most likely the same way Rulk's vision of power came to him in his own origins, through a personal experience. Nezarec most likely got his taste of torture from a mission on another world, and took a liking to the feeling of power in tormenting another. Hence, he would become the first tormentor of the Witness, and that is how he would remain for many chapters of his life, forming to resemble the image of the typical disciple among the ranks of the Black Fleet. But that changed. It all changed for Nezarec, and the seeds of this change were planted in Nezarec when he discovered the Void and mastered its mysterious properties. Now remember, this is not void light like we use. This is the void itself, which is a natural element of the universe. I know, I had trouble finding the difference myself, but moving forward, Nezarec would feel basked in the power he discovered, pride in the feat he achieved that no other had. So prideful he became arrogant in his power, and challenged another in the universe too powerful for him. And in that duel, he died. This is where the disciple in Nezarec essentially came to an end, for this is when Nezarec transcended all life in the universe, including the Witness itself. What is this transcendence? I have my own answer to that, and I believe it goes something like this. Nezarec became an entity within the Void itself. He discovered through his mastery of the Void that he could change the end course for his soul by redirecting it from the ether all life returns to upon death, and sent his life's essence to the Void, where he became an entity of the Void and its nature. This is a complicated section of my understanding that will be best relayed if you watch Bife's video on the Child of the Old Gods, where he gives a very detailed explanation on this topic that might bring you to my level of understanding. Now, I personally came to this conclusion when I ventured into the lore tab for the infamous Titan helmet, the Mask of the Quiet One. Said lore tab reads as follows. Must you all be so dark? You're too focused on the horns. Look, I have died hundreds of times hunting the shadowed killers in Murder Row. I spent years mulling over Toland's and Osiris's discourse on thanadonautics. I have dabbled a bit myself, and saw what lingers immediately upon old death. What I have done is found a way to channel the void, to draw that essence in before it is lost to the ether, to return it to light so it can be properly bestowed back on our enemies. Death does not need to be final. It can, in fact, be recycled. What's so dark about that? Satomi, architect of the mask. To further elaborate, I will pull a quote from Bife's video on Child of the Old Gods, a quote which should reveal precisely my intoned translation of this specific lore. The implication is that there is energy within a being lost to the ether upon death. No, not the ether consumed by the fallen. The point is that whatever is lost to the ether can instead be channeled by or through the void. That energy can be redirected and reused as a source of power against our enemies. Crucially, this makes a distinction between the void and the ether that life is seemingly lost to upon death. If the void is not a place where things go to die, then it may at least be a place where things may try to live. Perhaps that alone is enough to confirm the idea that it's possible for life, however strange and unknowable, to exist in the void. I do not believe the void as a whole itself is alive, but I do believe that there are powers in the void that are beyond us and anything we might know. So that is what I believe Nezarec did initially, redirected his essence and energies from the path heading to the ether and into the void instead, establishing his immortality as a spirit within the void. But there is a catch to that soul existence, and that is why I tell you, this isn't the full transcendence of Nezarec as a being. For what is he if he is indeed a spirit of the void? Why, a silent god. Of course, the void itself is the existence of nothing. The nothing inside which every something, everything physical, must exist. Nezarec has to follow that very nature, which is why in the void alone, Nezarec is silent, nothing more than a whisper on the wind. I know this is the case due to a comparison I made between the Warlock Arms, Briarbine's lore tab, and that of the last line held in Nezarec's whisper. They read as follows. New growth rises from the old. The vines coiled and twisted up her arm, blooming their deep purple as they settled over her glove. She flexed her fingers and felt thorns at her wrist. The thralls ran towards her, their claws outstretched. Her void soul shimmered into being as she stood her ground. She fired her weapon, and the void soul flooded towards them, reaching with its dark web of light as it weakened and drained the life from the thralls. They fell, one after another. Then the acolytes advanced. She sprinted towards the soul, the delicate tendrils on her glove unfurled. She could feel the faint call, the scent, the color that drew the eye. The void soul was drawn to her as she to it. She raised her weapon and fired again. Striations of red illuminate on its surface and throb like a heartbeat. The glaive's power feels faint, distant, and yet an ember of something terrible still burns within. Where are you? Eris whispers into the air. There is no reply. So Nezarec within the void is rendered silent, invisible and unable to return to the physical world. But this is where the second half of his existence comes into play. His existence in the world as a concept, as an idea. Allow me to explain in detail. It's Nezarec's power in the darkness, in memory, which allows him to not only interact with every living being in the world through his very mind, but exist as a visible entity through their memories. This is why he feeds on pain. This is why he haunts people. This is why he has to make himself known to the worlds, to establish his memory within people all over the universe. Memory of fear, memory of pain, memories by which his image will be known, because that memory forms a gateway to allow his consciousness to enter people's minds, granting him his ability to have power in the existing universe. And furthermore, I believe this power in memory is what allows him to return his body to the world. The memory people hold in their minds, he can then imprint it upon this essence in the void, which he can then cycle back into the real world. Though if he can't regenerate his body with the memory, he can follow the exact teachings of the Mask of the Quiet One, and return his essence to his already existing dead corpse. And this is the reason why I believe Nezarec will return in his old form rather than his light-altered one we saw in Lightfall, because that body is filled to the brim with unstable energies he cannot live with for long, which means he will have to look for his cult to get the memory of his old form, to imprint it upon his essence and return it to the physical world. Moving on now. You see, this is Nezarec's nature as a character. He himself exists in the void as an entity that cannot be harmed, but there alone he cannot speak or make himself known. His dark powers are the counterpoint that allows his fourth dimension to become known to the third dimension, or in simpler terms put, allows him to speak and make himself known to the physical world, allows his idea to be known to the world as a tangible concept. You see, people thought the concept in memory, that his existence as an idea, people claimed that was the only element of his transcendence and his existence. Here, I call that false. Because if Nezarec was only an idea, he wouldn't exist at all. For to exist, you need to possess the capability to think of ideas yourself. Ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This is why his existence in the void is the answer to that riddle. For in the void, he does exist and think, but he must also make sure his idea exists elsewhere within the real world for him to be able to actually have power in it. Or rather, as long as his idea, his memory exists within the minds of the people in the real world, Nezarec has the power to interact with it as he pleases. Okay, I essentially repeated myself there, but moving on. I believe there personally cannot be another way for him to exist otherwise, but you always have the ability to prove me wrong. Moving forward once again, though, Nezarec transcended the physical world itself, and returned not as a disciple, but a god. This is where the change took place in his mind, and he really deemed himself above all things, even the witness itself. I know this because he rebelled against the disciples' sacred discipline which Rolk himself established. He discarded his glaive for a weapon of his own choosing, his scythe, for he knows he has the power to make his own choices outside the authority of Rolk, because he himself is an entity now firmly above Rolk in the level of existence. For Rolk, even though he still has power, he is still mortal, whereas Nezarec is on the level of a god. Nezarec, in time, had his pyramid remodeled from a place of progress for the witness into a church where others will venerate him as a god. And lastly, Nezarec renamed himself from disciple to the final god of pain. He exalted himself above the witness. Essentially, he separated himself from the witness to this degree. For while he still serves the witness to obtain mutual benefits, everything he did and does in his life is dedicated to his highest priority, which is exalting his own existence. I believe Rolk would have been furious with this from the start, for Nezarec's rebellious behavior towards his discipline was a direct violation of his authority given to him by the witness. But the witness itself wouldn't have actually cared, of course, for even if Nezarec serves himself above all, the little things he does for the witness still fall in line with the goals of the final shape. Because while Nezarec is beyond the witness as a being, I believe at current that his spirit would still have been affected by the finalization of the universe to a degree. As I was told, his memory would have been extinguished, which would leave him confined to the void forever. Forever silent with no power anymore. It would leave Nezarec as a silent shadow, only able to spectate from his position of nothingness. Similarly to Sauron's form when the Lord of the Rings came to a close. However, though, the witness would have been cautious of Nezarec until the final shape could be achieved, because Nezarec himself holds a power that can actually damage the witness to a grand degree if he felt the need to use it. For Nezarec, again, his presence is based on memory, his ability to haunt and drive people to madness, to drive hundreds of worlds to madness. That is literally part of his gameplay loop. What is the witness? A compound being of many minds. If Nezarec actually attempted it, he could literally break down the individuals within the witness. He could haunt every single individual mind that makes up the being of the witness. In time, he could render every soul inside broken, unable to do anything but weep and cry at Nezarec's feet. Of course, that would require two things. One, Nezarec would have to be at the point where he wouldn't receive his mutual benefits from the witness, and he would have to have himself fully set up in his own plans. And second, he would have to know that specific aspect of the witness in order to target those minds. And you know what's funny? He actually does.
The coveted key to the witness's plans, and the sapid secret of its first victims.
Any lore geek will know. The witness's first victims were itself. The precursor race were the witness's first victims in this mentioning. So why didn't Nezarec take the opportunity to lash out at the witness's weak point if he knew he could, and take over the Black Fleet and the Disciples as their god? I fully believe he would have struck at the witness if he had this information much earlier on. But he didn't even have time to use any of this information. Why? Because I believe Nezarec got it straight from the Veil itself during the collapse. Or, rather near its end. I have many reasons and theories to back that up, even evidence, potentially. But I won't. Not here, anyway. For that will be a major topic in Chapter 2, the second part of this trilogy. It will be there among other topics to further strengthen my overall theory. With that said, here at the end of the first third, I will take my leave. I do so hope you haven't taken this video as a waste of your time. For your sake, I hope you enjoyed this video. Or if you did not, that is unfortunately time you'll never get back. If you did enjoy this video and have your own thoughts to share on this theory, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel with that notification bell turned on so that you may tune into its toll when another video rises from my channel. With that said, I hope your days are merry and joyous. I am Sapphire Tempest, I am the Candle of Stories, and I wish you all a merry farewell, until we meet again.